I was staring at the bright pink notice taped to my front door when my neighbor Tom walked by with his dog. And I knew before reading a single word that this was about to become the most absurd fight of my life. The paper fluttered in the cold February wind as I yanked it off, leaving a sticky residue on the wooden frame. My name glared at me from the top in bold letters. Ethan Zimmerman violation notice. Below that, a list of infractions that made my blood pressure spike despite the freezing temperature. According to the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association, I had failed to remove snow from my driveway within the required 24-hour window following the recent blizzard. The fine: $500 for the first offense, with an additional $100 per day until compliance was achieved. I crushed the paper in my fist, scanning my perfectly clear driveway. Every inch of concrete was visible. The walkway leading to my door was immaculate. Even the sidewalk extending along the street had been meticulously cleared. I had spent 6 hours with my snowblower after the storm, making sure everything was exactly as it should be. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered, storming back inside to grab my phone. My hands were still numb from the cold as I dialed the HOA office number printed at the bottom of the violation notice. The phone rang 4 times before a chipper voice answered. "Pleasant Valley HOA, this is Brenda speaking. How may I help you today?" "This is Ethan Zimmerman on Maple Ridge Drive. I just received a violation notice about snow removal and there's been a serious mistake." "Oh, let me pull up your account." I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Zimmerman." The violation was filed by our president, Patricia Morrison, during her neighborhood inspection on February 8th at 2:15 p.m. The notice indicates your driveway was not properly cleared. My driveway was completely clear by noon on the 8th. I cleared it myself. According to the documentation, Miss Morrison observed snow coverage exceeding the permitted threshold. I walked to my front window, looking out at my pristine driveway. "Can you tell me specifically what snow she observed?" "Because I'm looking at my driveway right now, and it's been clear for 3 days. The violation notice indicates improper prioritization of snow removal areas, which violated association standards." Brenda's tone remained annoyingly pleasant. "You'll need to submit your appeal in writing within 5 business days if you wish to contest the fine." Improper prioritization. What does that even mean? "I'm not at liberty to interpret Miss Morrison's findings, sir. The appeal process will address your concerns. Have a wonderful day." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Improper prioritization. I had followed the exact same snow removal routine I had used for the past 3 winters without a single complaint. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Rachel. She was at her mother's place in Ohio, helping care for her father who had recently undergone surgery. The message read, "How's everything? Weather improving?" I decided not to burden her with the HOA nonsense yet. "All good here. Give your dad my best." Instead, I called my neighbor Marcus, who lived 2 houses down. He answered on the first ring. "Ethan, please tell me you got one of those ridiculous notices too." "You got fined, $600. Apparently, I didn't clear enough of my driveway apron." I've never even heard the term driveway apron before this morning. Is that really a thing? This is insane. My entire driveway is clear. There's literally nothing wrong with it. "Join the club," Marcus said. "I talked to Jennifer across the street. She got hit with an $800 fine for not clearing around her mailbox post. Patricia has apparently decided to become the snow removal police." Patricia Morrison. I should have known. She had taken over as HOA president 6 months ago after moving to our neighborhood from somewhere in Connecticut. Within weeks, she had implemented new rules about garbage can visibility, approved paint colors, and acceptable lawn ornament sizes. The woman treated our quiet suburban development outside Columbus, Ohio, like her personal fiefdom. "What are we supposed to do?" I asked. "I'm writing my appeal tonight. You should too. Maybe if enough of us fight this, she'll back down." After hanging up, I spent the next hour photographing my driveway from every conceivable angle. I took wide shots, close-ups, and even climbed into my attic to get overhead views through the window. Then I sat down at my computer to write the most professional appeal letter I could manage, despite wanting to fill it with significantly less diplomatic language. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office, which occupied a small suite in a strip mall near the development entrance. The office was empty except for Brenda, who sat behind a desk cluttered with paperwork and a half-eaten bagel. "Mr. Zimmerman, what can I do for you?" I placed my sealed envelope on her desk. "My written appeal, along with photographic evidence." "I'd also like to speak with Patricia Morrison directly." "Miss Morrison doesn't take walk-in appointments. You can request a meeting through the online portal." "Then please submit my request immediately. This is urgent." Brenda's smile never wavered. "I'll make a note in the system. Someone will contact you within 7 to 10 business days." 7 to 10 days. The fine increases every day. By then, I'll owe over $1,000 for absolutely nothing. The accumulation of fines can be suspended pending appeal review if you submit a formal suspension request. How do I do that? Through the online portal. I resisted the urge to say something I would regret. Instead, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone right there in the office, accessing the HOA website. The portal required 3 different passwords, security questions, and a verification code sent to my email. By the time I finally logged in, Brenda was helping another resident who had also come to complain about a snow removal fine. I submitted my suspension request, then my meeting request, and finally took a screenshot of everything for my records. As I left, I heard Brenda explaining to the other resident that his violation was for insufficient snow removal on his recycling bin lid. This was getting ridiculous. That evening, I decided to do some research. Ohio state law had specific guidelines about snow removal priorities, especially regarding emergency access. I pulled up the state website and started reading. According to Ohio Revised Code Section 4511.71, property owners were required to maintain clear emergency access routes, with specific priority given to paths allowing emergency vehicles and personnel to reach the residents. The law actually protected homeowners who prioritized safety over aesthetics. I called my buddy Derek, who worked as a paramedic with Columbus Emergency Services. We had gone to college together and stayed in touch over the years. "Derek, weird question. When you guys respond to calls in residential areas during winter, what are the snow removal priorities you expect from homeowners?" "Why, you getting in trouble with your HOA. How did you know?" He laughed. "Because this is the 3rd call I've gotten about this in 2 days. Let me guess, Pleasant Valley Development?" "Yes, Patricia Morrison is fining everyone for made-up violations." "Okay, here's the official stance. Ohio state guidelines require homeowners to prioritize emergency access. That means clear path to your front door, clear driveway wide enough for emergency vehicles, and clear house numbers. Everything else is secondary." We actually had training on this because some municipalities were creating ordinances that contradicted safety priorities. "Can you document that for me? I need something official for my appeal." "Better than that, I can have my supervisor write you a letter confirming you're in compliance with state safety guidelines. Give me your address." I provided the information, feeling slightly less helpless. "Derek, thank you. This is absolutely insane." Patricia Morrison is a piece of work. She actually called the fire department 2 weeks ago to complain that one of your neighbors had their car parked in a way that might obstruct fire trucks. My captain went out there personally. The car was legally parked on the street, nowhere near a hydrant, with 20 feet of clearance. He told her to stop wasting emergency resources. That sounds about right. The next day, true to his word, Derek dropped off an official letter from Columbus Emergency Services. The document, printed on department letterhead and signed by his captain, confirmed that my property met all state-mandated snow removal priorities for emergency access. It specifically noted that Ohio state guidelines took precedence over local HOA regulations when it came to safety matters. Armed with this new evidence, I returned to the HOA office. This time, Patricia Morrison was there. She was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, professionally highlighted blonde hair styled in that aggressive suburban way, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She looked up from her phone with an expression that suggested I was interrupting something far more important than her actual job. "Mr. Zimmerman, Brenda mentioned you might stop by. Miss Morrison, I'm here about the violation notice. I have documentation proving that my snow removal fully complies with Ohio State Emergency Access Guidelines." I placed Derek's letter on her desk. She barely glanced at it. "Our HOA regulations supersede state minimums. We maintain higher standards in Pleasant Valley. State law actually says the opposite. When it comes to emergency access and safety, state guidelines take precedence over local regulations. That's established in Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Zimmerman, I don't appreciate your tone. I conducted a thorough inspection of your property, and you were in clear violation of our snow removal timelines and priorities. The fine stands." What exactly was in violation? My entire driveway was clear. My walkway was clear. Everything was accessible. Patricia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You failed to properly clear your lawn edges adjacent to your driveway. You also left accumulation on your front garden bed borders, creating an unsightly appearance that diminishes neighborhood property values." I stared at her. "You're fining me because I didn't shovel my flower beds. Proper snow removal includes all visible areas from the street view. It's in Section 17, subsection 4 of the updated HOA guidelines, which were distributed via email last month. I never received any updated guidelines." That's not the HOA's responsibility. All residents are required to regularly check their email for updates and announcements. "So you're telling me I owe $500 because you unilaterally decided that flower bed snow removal is now mandatory, sent out an email that many people probably never saw, and then conducted surprise inspections to generate fines?" Her expression hardened. "I'm telling you that as residents of Pleasant Valley, we all have a responsibility to maintain the premium standards that make this community desirable. If you're unwilling to meet those standards, perhaps you should consider relocating." The words hung in the air between us. I realized then that this was never about snow removal or community standards. This was about control. Patricia Morrison had found her little kingdom, and she was going to rule it with an iron fist, collecting fines along the way. "I'll be fighting this fine," I said evenly. "And I suspect many other residents will too." "That's your right, Mr. Zimmerman. The appeals hearing is scheduled for March 2nd. You'll receive official notification by mail." She returned her attention to her phone, dismissing me. I left the office and immediately started calling other residents who had received violations. By the end of the day, I had confirmed that 23 homeowners had been fined, with amounts ranging from $500 to $1,200. Most of the violations were for nonsensical reasons like mine, things that had never been issues before and weren't clearly defined in any existing HOA documentation. Marcus suggested we organize a meeting. We need to show up to that appeals hearing in force. If she sees it's just 1 or 2 people, she'll brush us off. But if 20+ residents are all fighting this, she'll have to take it seriously. We scheduled a gathering at my house for the following Saturday. I sent out a group email to everyone who had been fined, along with several other neighbors who were concerned about Patricia's aggressive new policies. Saturday arrived with another light snowfall, just enough to dust everything in a fresh layer of white. I was up at dawn with my snowblower again, this time clearing not just my driveway and walkway, but also every single inch around my property lines. I even cleared the lawn edges and flower beds, removing every trace of snow from anything visible from the street. The whole process took 3 hours. When I was done, my property looked ridiculous, like someone had taken a vacuum to every blade of grass. Tom walked by again with his dog and just shook his head. "You look like you're preparing for a presidential visit. Just making sure Patricia can't find anything else to fine me for." By noon, my living room was packed with 15 residents, with more joining via video call. Marcus had prepared an agenda, and Jennifer, who worked as a paralegal, had printed out copies of relevant Ohio state codes and HOA bylaws. "Okay, everyone, let's get started," Marcus said, standing near my fireplace. "First, let's document all the violations. Who got fined for what and how much?" We went around the room. The violations were absurd across the board. George had been fined because his snow removal left visible plow marks on his driveway. Linda was cited for failing to remove icicles from her gutters within 24 hours of their formation. Frank's violation was for clearing his driveway in a pattern that didn't match neighborhood standards. "What does that even mean, doesn't match neighborhood standards?" Frank asked, exasperated. "I cleared it front to back. How else would you do it?" Jennifer flipped through her printed documents. "Here's the thing. None of these violations are actually defined in the official HOA bylaws that we all signed when we bought our homes. Patricia has been creating new rules through email updates and claiming they are enforceable." "Can she do that?" Linda asked. "Not legally, no. HOA bylaws can only be modified through a formal amendment process that requires resident voting. Email updates can clarify existing rules but can't create new enforceable regulations, especially ones that result in financial penalties." A murmur of anger rippled through the room. "So all these fines are basically illegal?" George asked. "That's for a court to decide, but we have a strong argument that they're not enforceable. The problem is, fighting this could require actual legal action, which means lawyers and money." Marcus pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "I did some math. If you add up all the fines Patricia has issued just from this snow removal campaign, it's over $15,000. That money goes into the HOA operating fund, which she has discretionary control over up to certain amounts." "Wait," I said. "Are you suggesting she's doing this to generate revenue?" "I'm saying it's suspicious that she suddenly implemented aggressive new rules and started conducting daily inspection rounds right after the quarterly budget meeting, where several residents questioned why our HOA fees had increased, despite no visible improvements to common areas." The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Jennifer had to practically shout to get everyone's attention. Look, we need to stay focused. The appeals hearing is in 3 weeks. We need to build a coordinated case. Ethan, you have that letter from emergency services. That's solid evidence. Who else has documentation? Over the next 2 hours, we compiled everything we had. Photographs, timestamps, weather reports, state code references, and copies of the original HOA bylaws. Jennifer and Marcus organized it all into a presentation that we would deliver at the appeals hearing. But I wasn't satisfied with just waiting for the hearing. That night, after everyone left, I started digging into Patricia Morrison's background. Social media, public records, anything I could find. What I discovered was troubling. Patricia had been president of her previous HOA in Connecticut before moving to Ohio. I found a local news article from 3 years ago about that community. Residents had filed a class action lawsuit against their HOA board for excessive and improperly levied fines. Patricia's name appeared multiple times in the article. The lawsuit had been settled out of court, but several residents interviewed claimed the HOA had been using violations as a revenue stream to fund pet projects without proper community approval. I screenshot everything and sent it to Jennifer and Marcus. Jennifer called me within 10 minutes. Ethan, this is huge. She has a pattern of this behavior. We can use this to show the appeals board that she's acting in bad faith. There's more, I said, still scrolling through search results. I found her LinkedIn. Before moving here, she worked for a property management company that got sued for fraudulent billing practices. She was named in that suit too. We need to be careful how we use this. We can't make unfounded accusations, but we can definitely present a pattern of questionable conduct. Let me review everything and figure out the best approach. The week before the appeals hearing, Patricia escalated things. I found another violation notice on my door, this one claiming I had failed to remove snow from my roof within the required time frame, creating a potential hazard. The fine was $750. I called Derek immediately. Can you guys come out and inspect my roof? I need official documentation that it's safe. 2 hours later, a Columbus Fire Department inspector was at my house with Derek. The inspector, a guy named Robert Chen, spent 20 minutes examining my roof with binoculars and checking my attic insulation. Mr. Zimmerman, your roof is in excellent condition. Snow load is well within safe parameters. There's no hazard here whatsoever. Can you document that officially? Absolutely. This is the 3rd call we've gotten from this neighborhood about HOA claims of snow hazards. None of them have been legitimate. In fact, someone from the fire marshal's office is getting pretty irritated about the false reports. False reports. Your HOA president has been calling the fire department and city code enforcement claiming various snow and ice hazards throughout the neighborhood. Every single call has been unfounded. At a certain point, filing false reports to city services becomes a legal issue. Derek nodded. Captain Reeves is documenting everything. If she keeps this up, she could face charges for abusing emergency services. Robert gave me a detailed written report confirming my roof was safe and specifically noting that no snow removal was required per fire safety standards. I added it to my growing file of documentation. That evening, I received an email from Brenda at the HOA office. The appeals hearing had been rescheduled from March 2nd to March 16th. No explanation was provided for the 2-week delay. The email also reminded all appellants that fines would continue to accumulate during the delay unless a suspension had been approved. I checked my online portal. My suspension request was still marked as pending review. Marcus called an emergency video meeting that night with everyone who was appealing their fines. We were all furious about the delay. "She's playing games," George said, his video feed showing him in his garage. "She thinks if she drags this out and lets the fines pile up, some people will just give up and pay to make it stop. We need to escalate this above her," Jennifer said. "The HOA board has 5 members. Patricia can't unilaterally make all these decisions. We need to contact the other board members directly." I pulled up the HOA website and found the board member directory. Besides Patricia as president, there was Donald Hughes as vice president, Sharon Kendall as treasurer, and 2 at-large members, Michael Torres and Helen Young. We divided up the names and started making calls. I got Donald Hughes's contact information and dialed his cell phone number from the directory. "Hello," a man's voice answered, sounding slightly annoyed. "Mr. Hughes, this is Ethan Zimmerman from Maple Ridge Drive. I'm calling about some concerns regarding recent HOA violations and the upcoming appeals hearing." "Oh, another one. Look, Mr. Zimmerman, I'm aware there are some disputes about the snow removal fines. Patricia is handling all of that. You'll need to go through the proper appeals process." "Sir, with respect, over 20 residents have been fined for violations that don't appear in our official bylaws. The fines total over $15,000. This isn't a minor dispute." There was a pause. "What do you mean they're not in the bylaws?" "The violations are based on new rules that Patricia distributed via email. Jennifer Hartman, one of the residents, is a paralegal, and she's confirmed that the rules weren't properly implemented according to our governing documents." Another pause, longer this time. "I need to look into this. Send me everything you have. My email is on the website." "I will, thank you. But I also need to ask, were you aware that the appeals hearing was rescheduled with only a week's notice and that fine suspensions aren't being processed?" "What? No, I wasn't told about any reschedule. The board should have been notified and approved any changes to hearing dates." "So Patricia made that decision unilaterally?" "It appears so. Mr. Zimmerman, send me that documentation tonight. I'm going to have a conversation with Patricia first thing tomorrow." I hung up feeling like we had finally made progress. I compiled everything we had gathered and sent it to Donald in a massive email with multiple attachments. Marcus reported that he had spoken with Sharon Kendall, who also seemed unaware of the extent of Patricia's actions. Michael Torres didn't answer his phone, but Helen Young promised to review our concerns. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Donald Hughes. "Mr. Zimmerman, I spent half the night reviewing the documents you sent. I've also pulled the HOA financial records and examined Patricia's activities as president. I need to call an emergency board meeting. How many residents are involved in these appeals?" 23 who received fines, and probably another 30 or 40 who are concerned about the precedent being set. I need you to prepare a presentation for a special board meeting this Friday evening. Can you do that? Absolutely. Good. I'm sending official notice to all board members today. Patricia is not going to like this, but frankly, I'm troubled by what I'm seeing. Some of the financial decisions she's made are concerning, and these violations appear to be improperly implemented. Friday evening arrived with a mix of anxiety and hope. The special board meeting was held at the community center, a small building near the neighborhood pool. The parking lot was packed. Apparently word had spread, and almost every household in Pleasant Valley had sent a representative. The meeting room was set up with a table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs facing them. Patricia sat in the center chair, her expression tight and controlled. Donald was to her right, with Sharon, Michael, and Helen filling out the rest of the table. Patricia's eyes scanned the crowd with barely concealed anger. Donald called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice. This special session was called to address concerns raised by multiple residents regarding recent violation notices and fine assessments. Mr. Zimmerman has prepared a presentation, which he'll deliver now. I walked to the front with my laptop, connecting it to the projector. My hands were steady despite my nerves. I had practiced this presentation a dozen times. Thank you, board members. What I'm about to present represents the collective concerns of 23 households that have received violation notices in the past 2 weeks, along with the broader concerns of many others in our community. I started with a timeline, showing when Patricia took over as president and when the violation notices began. Then, I displayed the actual violations, reading them aloud so everyone could hear how absurd they were. Laughter rippled through the crowd at some of the more ridiculous ones. Now, here's the critical issue. None of these violations are defined in our official HOA governing documents. They're based on what Ms. Morrison has called updated guidelines distributed via email. However, according to our bylaws, any modifications to enforceable rules must go through a formal amendment process with resident voting. Patricia leaned forward to her microphone. Mr. Zimmerman, those emails were clarifications of existing standards, not new rules. All residents agreed to maintain their properties to certain standards when they moved here. Then, I'd like you to show me where in our bylaws it states that residents must remove snow from their lawn edges and flower beds, or where it defines acceptable driveway clearing patterns. She didn't respond. Donald looked at her expectantly, but she remained silent. I continued. Beyond the question of whether these rules are legitimate, there's the issue of selective enforcement and financial motivation. The total fines assessed equal over $15,000, all payable to the HOA operating fund. This happened right after residents questioned budget allocations. Sharon, the treasurer, spoke up. I'd like to add that I was not consulted about the fine schedule for these new violations. As treasurer, I should have been involved in any discussion of new fee structures. Patricia's face was reddening. The president has discretionary authority over enforcement matters. Not unilaterally, Donald said firmly, and not when it involves creating what amounts to new regulations. Patricia, did you consult with any other board members before implementing these snow removal standards? I didn't feel consultation was necessary. The standards were obvious extensions of our existing property maintenance requirements. I advanced my presentation to show the documentation from Columbus Emergency Services and the fire department. What's particularly concerning is that these standards actually contradict Ohio state safety guidelines. Emergency services have confirmed that residents should prioritize emergency access over aesthetic concerns. Several of us received violations despite being in full compliance with state law. Michael Torres spoke for the first time. I'd like to see that documentation. I handed him copies of the letters from Derek's captain and Robert Chen's roof inspection report. As Michael read them, his expression grew increasingly troubled. Helen Young was flipping through her own copy of the HOA bylaws. I'm looking at Section 17 that Patricia cited in some of these violations. It says nothing about snow removal timelines or specific clearing requirements. It just states that properties should be kept in good repair. Exactly, Jennifer said from her seat in the audience. The violations are based on Patricia's personal interpretation of vague language, not on actual written standards that residents agreed to follow. Patricia stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. I've been working tirelessly to improve property values in this neighborhood, and this is the thanks I get. People angry because they're being held accountable for letting their properties become eyesores. Miss Morrison, I said calmly, I have one more thing to share with the board and residents. I pulled up the news article about her previous HOA in Connecticut. Patricia Morrison was president of the Riverside Commons HOA before moving here. That community filed a class action lawsuit against their board for excessive and improperly levied fines. The pattern of behavior there matches what we're seeing here. The room erupted. Patricia's face went from red to white. That lawsuit was dismissed. Those allegations were completely unfounded. It was settled out of court, Jennifer corrected. Which means the allegations were serious enough that the HOA's insurance company paid out rather than go to trial. Donald held up his hand for quiet. Patricia, I think you need to step out of this meeting while the board discusses this matter. I will not. I'm the president of this association. And we're the board that has oversight over your actions. Please step out. For a moment, I thought Patricia was going to refuse. She stood there, hands clenched at her sides, breathing hard. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, heels clicking sharply on the linoleum floor. The board went into executive session, asking all residents to wait outside. We filed into the parking lot, where small groups formed to discuss what had just happened. The temperature was dropping, but no one seemed to care. There was electricity in the air, a sense that something significant was about to change. Marcus found me near my car. That was incredible. You completely dismantled her. We did it together. Everyone who documented their violations and filed complaints made this possible. Think they'll remove her as president? I don't know. But at minimum, these fines have to be thrown out. We waited for almost an hour before being called back inside. The board members had returned to their seats, but Patricia was noticeably absent. Donald looked tired but resolute. Thank you all for your patience. The board has made several decisions tonight. First, all snow removal violation fines issued in February are hereby rescinded. Residents who already paid will receive full refunds within 30 days. Applause broke out across the room. Donald waited for it to subside. Second, we're initiating a comprehensive review of all rules and guidelines that have been implemented since Miss Morrison became president. Any that don't comply with our proper amendment procedures will be invalidated. More applause. Third, the board is voting to place Miss Morrison on administrative leave pending a full investigation into her conduct as president. During this time, I'll be serving as acting president. The applause this time was deafening. I saw relief and vindication on faces throughout the room. George was actually wiping away tears, but Donald held up his hand. There's one more thing. During our review of HOA finances tonight, we discovered some irregularities that require further examination. We've contacted an outside auditor to review our accounts. If any financial misconduct is found, we'll be contacting appropriate legal authorities. The room went quiet. Sharon, looking uncomfortable, added, I want to be clear that, as treasurer, I had limited visibility into certain discretionary spending that Patricia controlled. The irregularities we found were not in areas I regularly reviewed. I take responsibility for not conducting more thorough oversight, and I'll be working with the auditor to provide complete transparency. What kind of irregularities? Someone called out from the back. We're not prepared to discuss specifics until the audit is complete, Donald said. But I want to assure everyone that we're taking this extremely seriously. The board exists to serve the community, not to enrich individuals or pursue personal agendas. The meeting concluded shortly after with a commitment to provide updates as the investigation proceeded. As people filed out, there was a sense of cautious optimism mixed with lingering anger over what Patricia had attempted to do. I was driving home when my phone rang. It was Rachel, calling from Ohio. "Hey, honey, how are things?" I answered. Complicated question. How are things there? I realized I hadn't told her any of this. Actually, there's been some drama with the HOA. Long story, but I think it's mostly resolved now. What kind of drama? I gave her the abbreviated version, hitting the major points. She listened without interrupting until I finished. "Ethan, I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this alone. I should be home next week. Dad's recovering well. Don't worry about it. You're exactly where you need to be." Besides, I had a lot of help from the neighbors. Still, I can't believe someone would actually try to fine you for snow removal after you spent hours clearing everything. That's insane. That's what I said. But hey, at least it brought the neighborhood together. I think we've all gotten to know each other a lot better through this. Silver lining, I suppose. Just promise me you're done fighting with HOAs for a while. Deal. I'm ready for some boring suburban normalcy. The following week passed quietly. I worked from home, took care of the house, and watched as more snow fell, and I dutifully cleared it again. This time, no violation notices appeared on my door. Then, on Thursday, I received an email from Donald Hughes marked urgent. I opened it immediately. "Dear Pleasant Valley residents, I'm writing to update you on developments regarding our investigation into HOA financial management. An independent audit has been completed, and the findings are troubling. Approximately $48,000 is unaccounted for from the HOA operating fund over the past 6 months. The missing funds were allocated to various projects and expenses, but documentation is either missing or falsified. Based on these findings, the board has unanimously voted to remove Patricia Morrison as president and revoke her access to all HOA accounts and property. We have also filed a report with the Columbus Police Department, as the audit indicates potential criminal conduct. The police have opened an investigation. The board will be holding a town hall meeting on Monday evening to discuss these developments and answer questions. We understand this news is shocking and concerning. Please know that the remaining board members are committed to complete transparency and ensuring proper oversight going forward. Sincerely, Donald Hughes, Acting President, Pleasant Valley HOA. I read it twice, then immediately called Marcus. "Did you see the email?" "Just read it." $48,000. How did she steal that much? I don't know, but I'm not surprised she escalated to theft. The woman clearly has no ethical boundaries. The town hall meeting on Monday was even more packed than the previous one. Donald stood at the front with a police detective named Sarah Morrison. No relation to Patricia, thankfully. Donald summarized the audit findings. Patricia had created fake invoices for landscaping, repairs, and maintenance work that was never performed. She had also approved herself for unauthorized expense reimbursements and had been siphoning money through a shell company she controlled. "How did she think she would get away with this?" Linda asked. Detective Morrison answered. "In our experience, people who commit this type of fraud often believe they're too smart to get caught, or they plan to cover their tracks before anyone notices. Miss Morrison had access to financial systems that typically would have checks and balances, but she exploited gaps in oversight." "Where is she now?" George asked. "Miss Morrison has been arrested and charged with theft, forgery, and fraud. She's currently out on bond awaiting trial. As part of her bond conditions, she's prohibited from entering Pleasant Valley property or contacting any residents." Sharon spoke up, her voice shaky. "I want to apologize to everyone. As treasurer, I should have caught this. I failed in my oversight responsibilities, and I take full accountability for that. I'll be stepping down from the board effective immediately." Several people started to protest, but Sharon shook her head. "No, this is the right thing to do. We need fresh leadership and better systems. I'll cooperate fully with the investigation and help transition a new treasurer, but I can't in good conscience continue in this role." The meeting continued for another hour, with Donald outlining steps the board was taking to prevent future misconduct. New financial controls, quarterly audits, and a complete revision of the HOA bylaws to ensure proper checks and balances. As people were leaving, Jennifer approached me. "We should probably thank Patricia in a weird way. If she hadn't gone so crazy with those snow removal fines, we might never have looked closely enough to find the real crimes." "True. Though I would have preferred to avoid the whole experience." "Fair enough." "Hey, a few of us are thinking about running for the board in the next election. We need people who actually care about the community rather than power trips. You interested? Let me think about it. Right now, I just want to get back to normal life." Rachel came home the following weekend, her dad finally stable and recovering well. I caught her up on everything that had happened, showing her all the documentation and news coverage. The local news had picked up the story, running segments about HOA corruption and interviewing several Pleasant Valley residents. "I leave you alone for a month and you take down a criminal mastermind," she said, laughing as we sat together on the couch. "I wouldn't call Patricia a mastermind. More like a small-time con artist who got greedy. Still, I'm proud of you for standing up to her. A lot of people would have just paid the fine and tried to forget about it." I thought about it, honestly, but it wasn't really about the money, it was about the principle. She was bullying people and abusing her authority. Someone had to say no. Rachel squeezed my hand. "That's why I love you. You're annoyingly principled sometimes, but it's also one of your best qualities." Over the next few months, life in Pleasant Valley slowly returned to normal. The board held elections and brought in new members, including Jennifer and Marcus. They worked with residents to completely rewrite the HOA bylaws, creating clear, reasonable standards and robust oversight mechanisms. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for September. The prosecution had a strong case, given the audit evidence and her previous history. Her defense attorney tried to argue that the missing money was due to poor record-keeping rather than intentional theft, but the fake invoices and shell company made that argument difficult to sustain. I attended several days of the trial, mostly out of morbid curiosity. Patricia looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than she had during her reign as HOA president. Her husband, a quiet man I had met only once or twice, sat in the back of the courtroom looking defeated. The prosecution called Donald Hughes and Sharon Kendall to testify about discovering the financial irregularities. They called the auditor to explain the evidence of fraud. They even called Derek's fire captain to testify about Patricia's false reports to emergency services, establishing a pattern of dishonest behavior. Patricia's attorney put up a half-hearted defense, trying to suggest that mistakes and misunderstandings had been blown out of proportion. But when the prosecution presented bank records showing deposits to Patricia's personal account that matched the timing and amounts of missing HOA funds, there wasn't much left to argue. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was not sympathetic. Patricia received 4 years in prison with additional restitution requirements. She would have to pay back every dollar she stole, plus penalties and interest. As the bailiff led her away, Patricia looked back at the courtroom. For just a moment, our eyes met. I expected to see anger or defiance, but instead I saw something closer to resignation. She had gambled and lost, and now she would pay the price. Walking out of the courthouse, I ran into Marcus in the parking lot. "Well, that's finally over," he said. "Yeah, feels strange, doesn't it?" This whole thing started with a stupid fine about snow removal. Sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest problems. If she hadn't been so aggressive with those violations, we might never have looked closely enough to find the real crime. True. Though I still can't believe she thought she'd get away with it. People like that always think they're smarter than everyone else. She saw us as sheep she could fleece. She didn't count on the sheep fighting back. I drove home feeling a sense of closure. Rachel had dinner waiting and we ate together on the back patio, enjoying the late summer weather. The neighborhood was peaceful, kids playing in yards and neighbors chatting over fences. "You know what's nice," Rachel said. "Coming home and not worrying about finding a violation notice on the door." "You're telling me." I used to tense up every time I turned onto our street, wondering what Patricia would complain about next. The new board seems pretty reasonable. Jennifer actually knocked on doors to ask what people wanted to prioritize for next year's budget. Can you imagine Patricia doing that? Not in a million years. The next day was Saturday, and I spent the morning working in the yard. Fall was approaching, and I wanted to get some pruning done before winter. Tom walked by with his dog, stopping to chat over the fence. "Heard Patricia got 4 years, he said. "Yep, trial ended yesterday." "Good. Maybe it'll deter the next person who thinks they can abuse a position like that." "We can hope. Though I think the new bylaws and financial controls will help too." "True. Hey, you going to the fall block party the new board is planning? Wouldn't miss it. Rachel's making her famous apple pie." "Excellent, see you there." As Tom walked away, I stood there in my yard, looking at my house. It was a good house in a good neighborhood. We had gone through a rough period, but the community had come together and fixed the problem. That was worth celebrating. The block party 2 weeks later was exactly what Pleasant Valley needed. The new board had organized it as a community building event, with no agenda beyond neighbors getting to know each other better. Tables were set up in the street, which was blocked off for the afternoon. People brought food, and kids ran around playing while adults talked and laughed. Jennifer gave a short speech thanking everyone who had stood up against Patricia's abuse of power. We learned that HOAs should serve communities, not rule them. And we learned that when residents work together, positive change is possible. People applauded, and then the party continued. I found myself talking with George about his landscaping plans, with Linda about her daughter's college search, with Frank about his vintage car restoration project. These were my neighbors, people I lived near but hadn't really known before Patricia's overreach had forced us to work together. As the sun set and the party wound down, Rachel and I helped clean up. Marcus came over carrying a trash bag full of paper plates and cups. "Good turnout," he said. "I think we had almost every household represented." "It's nice to see everyone relaxed and happy," I said. For a while there, the whole neighborhood was tense. That's what happens when you have someone in charge who treats residents as subjects instead of neighbors, but we fixed it. That's the important thing. Winter came early that year, with the first significant snow falling in mid-November. I woke up to 3 inches of fresh powder and immediately got my snowblower out. This time, clearing my driveway was just a normal chore, not a source of anxiety about potential violations. As I worked, I saw neighbors up and down the street doing the same thing. We all cleared our driveways and walkways at our own pace, prioritizing safety and access like reasonable people. No one was measuring lawn edges or checking for proper clearing patterns. It was gloriously mundane. Marcus came over when I was finishing up. "Hey, the board is meeting tonight to discuss winter maintenance standards. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're proposing a simple guideline. Clear your paths within a reasonable time frame based on weather conditions, prioritize emergency access, and help elderly or disabled neighbors if they need assistance. That sounds perfect, reasonable and community-focused. That's the goal. We're also proposing that any future enforcement focuses on genuine safety issues rather than aesthetics, and if someone gets a violation notice, they get a warning period to correct the issue before any fine is assessed. Common sense. What a concept. Right. Turns out running an HOA doesn't have to be complicated or adversarial. Who knew? That evening, I attended the board meeting where the new winter maintenance guidelines were discussed and approved. The meeting lasted 45 minutes, and most of that was spent planning a neighborhood holiday party. It was boring in the best possible way. As December progressed, Pleasant Valley transformed into a quiet, normal suburban neighborhood. Holiday decorations went up without anyone measuring exact placement or approving color schemes. People parked their cars in their driveways without worrying about angle regulations. The HOA maintained the common areas and handled actual community concerns, which is what it was supposed to do all along. On Christmas Eve, Rachel and I hosted a small gathering with Marcus, Jennifer, and a few other neighbors who had become genuine friends through the Patricia ordeal. We exchanged gifts, ate too much food, and told stories about the whole crazy experience now that enough time had passed to find humor in it. "Remember when she fined George for his plow marks?" Jennifer said, laughing. "Like, what was he supposed to do? Hand clear 3 feet of snow so it looked pristine?" Or when she claimed my roof was a hazard and the fire inspector came out and basically told her to stop wasting city resources, I added. "The best part was watching her face when you presented all that documentation at the board meeting," Marcus said. "She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon." "I still can't believe she stole almost $50,000, Rachel said. "That takes some serious nerve." "People get drunk on power," Jennifer said. "She started with the power trip of controlling everyone's properties, and it escalated to thinking she could steal from us too. Classic corruption arc. At least she's paying for it now," Marcus said. "And we've got systems in place to prevent the next wannabe dictator." As the evening wound down and everyone headed home through the gently falling snow, Rachel and I stood at our front door waving goodbye. "This turned out okay, didn't it?" she said. "Yeah, it did. Not the way I would have chosen to get to know our neighbors, but it worked out. You did good, standing up to her. A lot of people wouldn't have. I had a lot of help, and honestly, I was just tired of being pushed around over something so stupid. I cleared my snow properly, followed state guidelines, and she still fined me. At some point, you have to draw a line." "Well, I'm glad you drew that line. This neighborhood is better because you did." The new year arrived with more snow, more clearing, and 0 violation notices. Pleasant Valley had survived Patricia Morrison's brief reign of terror and emerged stronger for it. The community had learned valuable lessons about oversight, about standing up to abuse of power, and about the importance of reasonable governance. I still saw Tom walking his dog most mornings. George still obsessed over his lawn, though now without fear of arbitrary fines. Linda still complained about the weather, and Frank still worked on his vintage Mustang in his garage. Life was beautifully, wonderfully normal. In March, I received an email from the new HOA board. They were officially closing the books on the Patricia Morrison situation. All restitution had been secured through seizure of her assets and insurance claims. The money was being used to fund actual community improvements, including upgraded playground equipment and repairs to the community center. The email concluded, "Thank you to all residents who stood up for our community during a difficult time. Your courage and persistence ensured that Pleasant Valley remains a place governed by fairness and common sense rather than arbitrary power. We're proud to serve a community that refuses to accept injustice, no matter how small it might seem. Together, we proved that HOAs can be forces for good when properly managed and held accountable. I printed the email and stuck it on our refrigerator, a reminder of an absurd chapter in our lives that ultimately had a positive ending. Rachel saw it when she came home from work, saving that as a memento, something like that. Remember when this all started because Patricia claimed I didn't clear my flower beds properly, and now she's in prison for theft and fraud. Karma works in mysterious ways. It really does. That evening, sitting on our couch with Rachel, scrolling through streaming options for something to watch, I felt genuinely content. Our house was warm, our neighborhood was peaceful, and no one was going to find me for how I cleared my driveway. Sometimes the simple things in life are the most valuable. The Pleasant Valley HOA continued to function exactly as it should. A boring administrative body that maintained common areas and enforced reasonable rules. Board meetings had tiny attendance numbers because nothing controversial ever happened. Violation notices were rare and always preceded by friendly warnings. Annual fees went toward actual community needs rather than funding someone's personal corruption. In other words, everything was exactly as it should have been all along. And it had only taken one ridiculous fine over snow removal timing to expose the rot and allow the community to clean house. I cleared my snow following state priority guidelines. Emergency services confirmed I was doing it right. And Patricia Morrison ended up in prison for trying to bully me and others with fabricated violations while she robbed us blind. Sometimes standing up for yourself over something small leads to discovering something much bigger. And sometimes a neighborhood full of people who just want to live their lives in peace can come together to defeat someone who thinks power means control rather than service. Patricia learned that lesson the hard way. The rest of us learned it the right way, and Pleasant Valley was better for it. Life went on. Snow fell and was cleared. Seasons changed, and our little suburban neighborhood remained exactly what it was supposed to be, a community.